Good day, everyone. My name is David Williams, Executive Director of the United States Association for Energy Economics. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Energy Sector Recruiting and Career Advice Webinar Series. We're grateful to our moderator, Dr. Chiara Loprete from Penn State University, and our distinguished panelists to educate our students and young professionals on gaining entry into the energy industries today. First, a little bit about the United States Association for Energy Economics. We are the largest affiliate of the International Association for Energy Economics and provide a forum for the exchange of ideas, experience, and issues among professionals interested in the field. The organization produces 2 professional journals, a newsletter, and holds conferences and virtual events, and a host of other products and services that you can find on our website at www.usae.org. If you're not already a member of the organization, we welcome you to join. A few housekeeping matters in regard to today's webinar before I hand things over to our moderator. First, this webinar is being recorded for those that cannot participate in today's live event. If you have a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window and post your question. We've allocated sufficient time during this webinar to address your questions. And now I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Dr. Chiara Loprete, Associate Professor of Energy Economics at Penn State University. Chiara, over to you.
Thank you, Dave, for the introduction, and thank you so much to all of you who are joining the second episode of this webinar series that focuses on energy sector recruiting and career advice for undergraduate students. It is my great pleasure today to welcome Marie Fagan and Sayad Mudashiru from London Economics International. Sayad provides technical support and guidance to industry leaders in North America and around the world. And his areas of expertise include regulatory impact analysis, market research, and trends analysis, among others. He has been involved in the recruitment process at London Economics and will share some insights on that with us today. Marie is the chief economist at London Economics International. She has conducted research and consulted in energy economics for over 30 years, and her work has spanned international upstream and downstream oil and gas, coal, and North American gas and power markets. From 1996 to 2014, Dr. Fagan was with Cambridge Energy Research Associates, which is now IHS Markit, our company guest for the first episode of the series. And before joining CIRA, she served as an economist with the US Energy Information Administration. I'm also delighted to introduce our 2 student panelists today, Chetan Saha and John Paul Adamonis. I'll start with John Paul. John Paul is from State College, Pennsylvania. He is majoring in energy, business, and finance at Penn State with a minor in statistics. When he graduates, he would like to work with small renewable startups. And one fun fact about him is that at 17, he spent 3 months alone hiking the 730 miles of the Appalachian Trail, which is quite impressive. Chetan was born in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, Canada. He is double majoring in energy business and finance and energy engineering with a minor in geography, also here at Penn State. His dream job is working for the UN. And one interesting fact about him is that he has lived in 6 countries across Asia, Africa, and North America. So he definitely adds his international experience to the webinar. I'll just say a couple of words about the structure of the webinar, which is really meant to be a conversation between the students and our guest panelists. I guess we'll start with Marie, who will tell us a little bit about her career path in the energy industry for 10 minutes or so. Then we'll hand things over to Sayad, who will provide an overview of internship and job opportunities at London Economics. And then we will really open the floor to questions. We'll start with questions from Chetan and John Paul. And then again, we'll open the floor to questions from the students in the audience. Dave already went over some of the ground rules. If you have a question that is related to recruiting and career advice for one of the panelists, please ask your question in the Q&A box, clarifying if the question is directed at Marie or Sayad or perhaps both. I will monitor the chat box during the event and share your questions with our two panelists. And obviously, as we've seen in the first episode, the more engagement there is in the live chat, the more this will feel like we're doing more of a Q&A. I think that is everything in a nutshell. So I'll hand this over to Marie.
All right, thanks very much, Dr. Loprete. I'm very pleased to be joining you all. And I think because the audience is undergrads, even though I've been here in this industry doing various kinds of research and other interesting things for about 30 years, I really sort of need to just start at the beginning for my 10 minutes, because it'll, I think, help ground folks, even though I think it's very possible that the world's changed somewhat, but I think some of the experiences might be relevant. So when I was an undergraduate, I was at the University of Connecticut and I was a business major. I'm an economist now, I have a PhD in economics, but at the time, I really didn't want to spend years and years in graduate school and I couldn't wait to get out of college. So I didn't study economics, knowing that you really needed a graduate degree. And I graduated with a business degree and had a couple of different jobs and got bored basically and realized that I really like economics and I really like a challenge and I really like unsolved problems and I love to do research. And after a couple of years working, I applied to graduate school and I got into graduate school at American University and other places where I applied. I didn't get in, but I was very pleased to go there. Washington, D.C. is a great place to study economics and be an economist. And it was one of the reasons I applied there. And I didn't actually start on the energy side. I was interested in environmental issues, but I ended up with an internship at U.S. Department of Energy. And I was hooked. It was fascinating. It was interesting. I did a project on waste to energy. And that kind of got things rolling because an internship is a great way. And this was an internship while I was in graduate school, but there are internships obviously available to undergrads, especially, if you want to try an industry and see if you like it. But that was really helpful because it gives you a foot in the door for a job opportunity, either at the place where you had the internship, which for me was DOE, or a related job. So it was a little bit of an accident, but when I kind of stumbled into energy, I really, really enjoyed it. And for a couple of years, I worked for kind of a contractor for DOE, Department of Energy, one of the companies in Northern Virginia, and did a lot of different projects, worked mostly for the Energy Information Administration's forecasting models, the NEMS models, and a few other things. And in the meantime, finishing grad school, working on my dissertation, I got married and had a kid. It was kind of busy. It's kind of a blur now. I can't give you too much detail. And then I actually had an offer from DOE EIA, and I moved over to that side for a couple of years, but I realized that the work was almost too stable, and I liked a lot of variety, a little more stabbing and shooting, as they might say in the consulting business. And so after a couple of years there, I ended up through a contact, which is always important. A contact won't get you a job that you're not qualified for, but if you are qualified, it's just great to know people who know what's going on. I got a job with Cambridge Energy Research Associates in Boston, in Cambridge, Mass. So I moved up there from DC. And that was a whole new world. It was consulting. It was pretty high level, high profile stuff. I learned a lot besides how to do research and how to write. There was a big focus on presentation skills, on being client ready. So it was a great learning experience, and you're exposed to really sort of high levels folks in the energy business, and did that for a few years, and it was quite interesting. But then I and this happens sometimes in a career, you've got momentum, but sometimes you get a little stuck and you're not in the flow of things anymore. And I made a decision, which at the time was a very difficult decision to do because CIRA, Cambridge Energy, is a great company, but I decided I really needed to go someplace else, to sort of replant, bloom in a bigger pot. So I changed jobs then and went to another company. And that situation only lasted about a year, didn't quite work out. But then Cambridge Energy wanted me back to do some other things, help them out with another line of business, the gas side. I had been in the oil side. And that was a very interesting opportunity. It was extremely unusual. They had a situation where almost an entire team of people had left and gone to a competitor. And it was kind of a high risk situation. We had to rebuild everything that had been there. So I rejoined, and that started about an 11-year stretch at the company. So I was at CIRA about 17 years, oil to gas. I had been hired as an associate, became a director on the gas team, and then I had the opportunity to start a couple of new lines of business. So a lot of interesting things happening over the years. And I being a New Englander and having my family roots here and being a petroleum economist, I realized maybe 10, 15 years ago that ultimately it's not an oil producing region, basically New England. We don't have a lot of indigenous energy. And if I really wanted flexibility in my career, I really needed to step out of oil and gas, which are interesting fields, but to get some more electric power experience under my belt. And so when I saw opportunities within CIRA and IHS to do that, I did. So I'd been on the oil side. When I came back, I was on the gas side. There was an opportunity to lead a research group that was putting out products for our financial clients that had oil, gas, and electric power. So I raised my hand to do that. And they said, sorry, no, thank you. We don't want you to do that. We want someone else. And after 4 or 5 months, they couldn't find anyone else and said, fine, we'll give it to you, Fagan. So I guess sometimes that tells you sometimes you just have to be persistent and cheerful, and you will eventually get what you want. People will come around. But that was really helpful. I got a foot in the door and a deeper understanding of the electric power sector, which is a very complex sector. And then it kind of came around again that I really needed to find something new. I'd been with CIRA for a total of about 17 years. And with the electric power background I now had, I was, I guess, an attractive candidate for London Economics because we have a very big electric power focus. So I joined London Economics about 6.5 years ago. My colleague Syed, who was there, and many other very talented and smart people. And so I've been there, like I said, about 6.5 years. I came in as a managing consultant, and I'm now the chief economist there. So that is a very brief and high level kind of flyover of my career. Everybody's path is going to be different. And as you can see, part of my path was, basically taking advantages of just changes that came across, and not necessarily everything planned out perfectly, but just with an eye towards, I had a broad view of where I wanted to take things. And then when an opportunity showed up that fit into that, I went forward and took it. So that's it in a nutshell.
And I think this is great advice. This is a great summary, which, as you said, can be helpful for students who are entering the job market today, the energy field. So thank you for that. And we'll have a chance to explore and go into a little more details. But now what I'd like to do is maybe hand things over to Syed, who will have another 10 minutes or so to tell us a little bit more about internship and job opportunities at London Economics.
Thank you, Tiana. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Syed Mudashiru, and I'm a managing consultant at London Economics International. So today, or just a little bit before diving into the internship, just want to say a few words about London Economics International, and just to give you a little bit of a perspective and how my description will basically tie into the type of job opportunity that we have and how we see the world. London Economics International takes a great pride in the multicultural staff that we have. So we have our colleagues, we have about, I think, people from 20 different countries, and we speak multiple languages. So this is very important to us, and this is part of our identity, and this allows us um, to have a very diverse geographic clientele. You know, we do work in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, in North America, obviously a little bit in Europe. And so this is, because it's such a part of the DNA of the company, we tend to appreciate from candidates the ability to speak multi-languages and also some flexibility in the mindset. So being able to be adaptable in various situations and have the desire to put yourself out there into the unknown and work on different engagements that can vary highly at a high degree. So I just wanted to say that, and I'll say a few words about it later when I talk about what we research in candidates. So our industrial focus is the power sector. Okay, it's the energy. So we do a lot of work in natural gas and electricity, and we have a multidisciplinary approach. And the type of business vertical that we tackle ranged from regulatory economics, so everything about policy design, regulatory framework analysis, to more technical support that we provide to clients. We work on the operations side of the market. We do a lot of electricity price forecast. We look at the dynamics of the market in the long run, in the short run, and so on. So very basic economics, type of application to that market. The type of positions that we typically hire for, I would say there are in general three main positions for full-time work. So we have research associate, consultant, and senior consultant, and this is separate from internship. As far as position, research associate will basically be any candidate out of school right after graduation. We don't really have a great expectation on any knowledge or familiarity with the industry for that position. I guess the prerequisite will be some strong interest in the energy as a whole, because if you're interested in the hospitality industry, I think that it's not going to work for us. Now, the consultant position, so we look to hire people with 2 or 3 years of experience and with direct experience in infrastructure and energy. So that will be for the consultant level, and around the senior consultant level, we'll be looking at staff with about 5 years of experience, direct experience in infrastructure and energy industry. But for senior consultant, there will be some emphasis on the actual experience. We will be looking at the type of project that the candidate has worked on, and his ability to lead project for a year and so on. So I guess for undergraduate, obviously the immediate and more relevant position will be a research associate position. And this will typically start this position around the summer, before the fall, or at some time it just happened that we have some need that we want to fill. Another way for us to recruit candidates will be through internship. So we have summer associates, fall associates, so for summer associate, so I didn't say earlier, we have 2 main offices, one in Toronto, Canada, and one in Boston. We have an office in, we have colleagues around the world, so now it's very difficult for me to pinpoint. We have some in California, in Hong Kong, in Taipei, but we really have two physical space, one in Toronto and one in Boston, Massachusetts. In Toronto, what we try to do with with summer position is to hire co-op. So there will be students who will be available for 2 to 6 months, and we need that space to complete their co-op program. In Boston, in the US in general, we'll be looking at candidates, master students. I guess we will hire them the summer before the graduation, or it can be a student with bachelor degrees who just graduated. In some cases, we usually for bachelor, we usually will hire the candidates during the summer, and it's usually as a test. We will hire them for 3 months, and then at the end of the 3 months, we'll decide if it makes sense to continue the journey with that candidate. And the fall associate, there's more flexibility around the fall associate. We tend to recruit for recent graduates, future graduates, student with bachelor degree, master student with master degree, and so forth. So this is basically the sort of program that we have, and it's very important for this type of specialized industry to have the ability to test the candidate and judge the level of engagement and interest. Consulting, it's a fairly demanding and intensive job. So if there is no interest, there will be no fun. This is why, although we are very, we have a lot of leeway on our hiring for research associate position and survey associate, the bare minimum that we ask for candidates and the prerequisite is genuine interest in the energy field. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I don't know if Mary, you want to add anything to it?
Syed, I think that was good. I mean, it's consulting, it's fast paced, you learn a lot. My favorite thing about London Economics is we don't do the same thing over and over. We do any individual, because it's not a huge company. We're not pigeonholed. We work on a lot of different kinds of projects. That's I prefer that personally. And the learning curve can be steep and sometimes very demanding, but you can learn more in a year or two here than 5 or 10 years in other positions. So that's I find that very attractive.
That's right. Yes. So the nature of the firm being a small company, that's really provide opportunities to all staff, younger, older, and so on, to be involved at a very high level. I started to work at LEI after I graduated from Brandeis University. So I had a master at Brandeis University. So I started to work for LEI for about 7 years, I would say 8 years, and then I left the company because I was getting bored, despite the diversity of work that we're getting. But I was longing for an industry specialty, so specialize a little bit for my focus on a technology. So I went to work for Deliverables Technologies, which is a waste to energy company. So they basically turn municipal solid waste into electricity, and it was a very good experience. Sometimes you just need to reset the button and learn new things, expand your network, which is incredibly important, and that allowed me to come back to London Economics International. It's a little bit of a different role, where right now I spend about 70% of my time working for a market participant that owns and operates hydropower stations, which was something that was really interesting to me, is being able to combine hands-on experience, from the perspective of a market participant, but also consultant, keep the consulting work going also. So yeah.
So thank you very much for that. I thought that was a great overview. There is a question that Jimmy asked to Marie. Maybe I can share this question with you before we ask John Paul and Chetan to share their questions. So Jimmy's question is as following. You said that a graduate degree is pretty essential to being a full-time economist. Is a PhD more necessary than a master's? And when in your careers would you encourage us to go to graduate school if that's something that we're interested in?
Okay, that's a good question. So from my perspective, when I started grad school, I didn't even know anyone who had a PhD. I had no clue. And so I applied to master's programs, but it turns out if you can get into a PhD program, you can get funding, right? So you get school paid for and you get some kind of stipend because you're a teaching assistant. So I luckily found that out, and that's why I went for a PhD. So I think it kind of depends. Some places, some consulting companies only want folks with what they call a terminal degree, like an MBA or a PhD. That is a small percentage of companies. And I would say, working on a PhD, if you love research, because it is an absolute lot of work. It took me, I was working full time, I was married and everything. It took me 9.5 years. I mean, I think my committee was shocked I even finished. So it's a commitment. I'd say you got to love research. You have to be patient. You're working on something that you're the only person in the world who cares about it. So, think about how you have to prioritize things to make that happen. But for me, it was very rewarding. But if you're the kind of person where you're not so much a researcher, or if you're more of I would say a doer or an advocate, if you want to get into development of renewable energy projects, things like that, I would say a master's degree probably opens enough doors. So it really depends on the kind of person you are, what makes you happy, what makes you tick. But and people start PhD programs and they finish up by just say getting the master's and not doing the dissertation research. So there's that path too. And as far as the timing in your career, I personally waited a couple of years. I didn't go to grad school until a couple of years after undergrad and working. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. If you know that you love a certain topic and you want to stay in it and delve deep. I also think that now compared to when I was in college and grad school, it's almost 40 years. It's almost more of a foot in the door necessity to have a master's or to have an advanced degree, whereas years and years ago it just the bar wasn't where it is now. So those are a couple of considerations, and a PhD can be great. You can stand out from the other other candidates, etc. But you have to think about how it fits into like how you like to interact with the world and what you want to get out of your career.
Yeah, can I add to that also? And I think, Mary, you're making a great point, and everything comes back down to where are your interests, right? It's and the energy sector is so diverse. It's an unbelievable industry because there is so many different ways of being involved. You can be involved on the regulatory side, on the environmental side, to some sustainability and so on. And one thing that is very important to me is development work. So when we do business in Africa or in Latin America, in emerging countries, and if you want to work for an organization such as the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the KfW, or any of those international donors, I think you don't necessarily need a PhD to get your foot at the door. And in that case, I would advise to actually try to get some experience on the ground, and then that will allow you to quickly identify the sort of the area where we would like to drill further, and get some expertise and experience. But that would be my advice, not necessarily just going straight to, because you might find later some field of interest that are more suitable to, you know, your professional development. And so, yeah, I would say it's probably to wait and get some experience.
So thank you for sharing both of your perspectives. It's really really useful. Let's see if maybe we can ask our two student panelists to go ahead and ask their questions. So Chetan and John Paul have prepared one question for Mary and one question for Sayad. I'm going to ask Chetan to maybe go first and ask Mary, ask his question to Mary, and then we'll move from there. Thank you, Chetan.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lopret. So Mary, my question is basically, what are some of the unique challenges in terms of the clients that you've interacted with in your role as chief economist, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, like before and during, and what do you see being the challenge as we move past it?
So in terms of interacting with clients, it's, obviously it's a little bit harder to develop business with new clients. With folks that you've worked with for years and years, it's not such a big challenge. They already know you, they know your work, et cetera. But one of the ways that consulting companies, get interesting work and grow is by actually going out and seeing people, talking to them about what's on their mind and what we can do for them. And live events like conferences are great for that. And also the fact that somebody's willing to, leave their home city and, go on the road and visit other cities and say, hey, I'm in town for XYZ conference. Love to stop by and say hello, tell you about London economics. We're working on XYZ project that seems to dovetail with the situation, the energy world that you're living in, et cetera. So that kind of business development, people who won't necessarily take a phone call or respond to an email, if you're making the effort to go see them, almost nobody will say, no, sorry, we're not interested in sitting down for a 10-minute meeting or a 15-minute meeting, because it means something to people that you're making an effort to go out there. So that piece is actually, it's a little trickier. I mean, we've had new clients, we've done work for new folks in the past few months. It's, it's not ideal. And so hopefully if things get back to normal, or perhaps it'll be a new normal, there'll be a little more face-to-face. Conferences are getting more, online conferences are getting a little bit more elaborate, where there's more opportunities for small group chats and things like that. I don't think anything really can take the place of a face-to-face with people who actually don't know you yet.
And that's definitely a great point. We will see. I was wondering how many, just out of curiosity, how many virtual conferences have you attended so far, Mary?
I've presented at a few. We had actually it's ongoing today as well as yesterday. What we call the Energy Bar Association, and that has chat rooms and cocktail hours and things like that. And the Boston Bar Association. I do regulatory work, and so we have an audience of lawyers who practice in front of their state commissions and the FERC and things like that. So I've presented at a couple of those so far this year, and then of course there's many webinars and things like that. But the conferences are helpful because there's chat rooms and there's a little more interaction than presenting in a webinar, which is great for giving information, and sometimes there's follow-up with folks. So I've done a couple of virtual conferences so far this year.
Cool. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Oh, sure thing.
Chetan, would you like to go ahead and maybe ask Sayad your question, and then we'll go to John Paul's questions.
Sure, Dr. Lopret. So Sayad, my question for you is that I imagine that as the world is moving through this time right now, the energy industry is bound to change in some manner. So what characteristics are you looking for in new candidates And how is the firm London Economics International gonna keep up with the new trends in these hiring practices as well?
Yeah, and thank you for your question, Sharon. And again, I just want to stress the fact that I'm not necessarily an HR person, so everything that I'm saying is through the lens of somebody very much involved in the hiring practice at London Economics. But one thing that the company did that was amazing, and obviously was to transition into a digital world pre-COVID-19. So we were already, that was interesting because the culture of the company was changing already over the past 2 years. And I don't really know why. There's a lot of reason. And so a lot of us had have had that ability to cut on their commute and work remotely. But obviously that level of flexibility is different from what we have now, where we are pretty much all forced to work remotely. So in a sense, the company was already prepared to sort of deal with this new paradigm and adjust. We have all of our resources online, and everything is in the cloud. We still trying to maintain, I guess one of the challenge in this new paradigm is how do you maintain the culture within the company, right? So how do you onboard new hire? How do you make them comfortable? How do you make them feel part of the team? Because right now we don't really have any conversation, next to the coffee machine or in the conference room, having lunch together. So we're losing all of those intangible moments that, really help solidify, the team spirit. So that's what we're missing. So what we will, expect for candidate is really being open-minded, flexible, being able to work in that environment where you might not have as much. I'm not gonna say support because we try to make everything we can. We try to do everything we can to make onboarding comfortable for new hire. But before it was just easy to come around the corner, knock on the door of the colleague, and discuss chat, and you don't really have this spontaneity anymore when you have everyone working remotely. So what I would expect for new hire to do is to basically to not shy away from reaching out every single time, communicate, be very good at communicating needs, frustrations, observations, because at LEI we have an open door policy, and we really encourage people to engage with each other at all levels. So we would like people to be comfortable doing that. I know that this might be a little bit out of some folks' comfort zone, but it is something that will be a key ingredient in making any transition successful. Communication. Yeah.
And I could add a couple things to that. So, so as Syed said, for London Economics, we have colleagues all over the world. We've had remote working, some of us in the office 2-3 days a week, home a couple days a week, people all over the world. So we have a culture of being really getting used to and being able to communicate with people and doing big projects, tight deadlines, whatever, and coordinating work from all corners of the globe. So we'd already had that in place. And we're a fairly small company, about 25, 30 people. And when, as we all sort of went into lockdown, our president set up, everybody has like a 15-minute call with him once a week, face to face, what's on your mind, whatever. It could be your projects, it could be something else. And I think that's been really helpful in a small organization. And I've worked for really large organizations. IHS is a large organization. The Department of Energy is large. I've worked for very small companies, smaller than London Economics. But the great and there's pluses and minuses for all sizes of organizations. But at least at LEI, to have the head of the company, the president's ear for a few minutes a week, it's actually a really big deal. So once we started doing that, I personally really like that. I'd always think twice about, do I need to bring the boss into this decision or that, or does he really need to know X, Y, Z? He's busy. But now I know, I can save it up, and once a week I can just say, here's a few things that are going on. I could use your feedback. So I found that to be really helpful. But I think most organizations where you'd be looking for a job or an internship, it's probably worth asking them what are they doing to keep people connected. We have a virtual, coffee hour or coffee half hour, or coffee 10 minutes if that's all you have. In the afternoon, it's kind of a standing invitation, and people just join it and have informal conversations. But probably an organization that you'd be looking at they're probably doing something that's worth asking about. Because earlier in your career, you really want, and I know I felt this way back in the day, you really want feedback. You want to know if you're doing a good job, are you doing a bad job? Is no news good news? How come no one's talked to me for a week? And it might be harder to get that kind of feedback in sort of a remote environment. So there might be structures in place where you can get that, or you can reach out and ask for it, or you can decide that you can live without it a little bit longer than normally you would have. But I think it's just something to keep in mind.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I think these are great points. So thank you both for sharing your perspectives on that. I think a related question that a student in the audience has asked, and this is more related to what Sayed was saying. The student is asking, what are the best steps juniors and seniors can take to stand out from other students when they apply for internships and jobs? And this is really directed, I guess, to both of you, because the student doesn't say if it's specifically for Sayed or Marie. So what are your perspectives on this one?
So if I understand the question, so basically how to stand out in the pool of candidates, is that the question? Yeah. I mean, to me, I think it is, first of all, the candidate CV, which is the first sort of, it's basically the first contact that you will have with the students through the CV, that's a very important document. So you want to make sure that the CV tells the story. The CV is logical in the way it is organized, and that the CV is relevant to whatever position the candidate is applying. Because we've seen a lot of CVs, and you will be shocked by the number of CVs that review that basically are completely at odds with the ad, with the job posting, because the candidate didn't go through didn't revise its CV, because sometimes you have to tailor your CV for a specific job. You don't want to use one size fits all CV for every single position that you're applying for. So you have to have that mental sort of commitment to always think about a job as a standalone project that you're going to be working on. And then you focus on your CV, and you try to make the changes that will be consistent with the story that you're trying to tell and to relay through your CV, so that when a CV comes on the table of the reviewer, you want to make it very difficult for them to dismiss that CV, right? So I think that will be the first thing, is really making sure that every single position that you're applying for, even if it's tweaking a couple of things, it doesn't need to be an overhaul of your CV, but just sometimes changing a few sentences, can make a big impact, right? So You want to have that mental discipline to do it for your CV and for your cover letter. That would be the first thing. And the second thing to me during interview is really the story. You have to be able to craft a story that is a true story, obviously, not to fabricate a story, but you want to be able to tell your story in a way that is relevant for the position, but it also makes sense with everything that you've done. So that will position you that will put you in the best light for the reviewer. To me, in interviews, that's always something that I'm looking for. It's like, obviously everyone can write about why I'm applying for this job. Sometimes you don't have a very good reason to apply for a job. You look at the job looks okay. Why not? Okay, we get that because we have done that, but still, in an interview, it will be very important to still craft a story that is tailored for that specific position, something that makes sense, because that whatever you say in that interview, you have to make sure that that story will stick and will stay with the reviewer. That will be my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Sayad. Marie, would you like to add anything to that? Like, what if you're interviewing a new candidate, what makes that candidate stand out from other students who are interviewing for the same position?
We look for a good fit. So like Sayad's remarks point to that. You want, and even at a higher level, even if you're not an intern, even if you're a mid-career person or a later career person, you always do, as Sayad said, and tailor your resume, your cover letter, your email, your communication to that particular job. What are they looking for, and how does it match my resume? And you're going to do a different resume for every job, and it's more work. But first of all, it shows that you're thinking. It shows that you know how to do research. It shows that you've looked into the company. So that's, as Sayad said, the best foot in the door. And then when we're talking to folks, the person with the most experience or the smartest person or whatever isn't always the person who gets hired. It's somebody who you think is a good fit. So if your organization is really aggressive and hard charging, you might not hire somebody who looks like they might be kind of quiet and just would get chewed up and spit out. Like that doesn't make anybody happy, right? But if you're a company that's more collegial and cooperative, you're not going to hire somebody who's like just hard charging and runs over other people. It really depends on the organization. And so the fit just has to be, I'd say, professional as well as personal. So you have to present a positive but accurate version of who you are. And that's what we look for. Like I said, it's not always the most experience. It's not, some candidates look great on paper, but they come in and you're like, this person would be great at some other company. Or, it's a lot of, and nobody wants to get rid of someone. I mean, internships are great because you start, everyone gets to try everybody out and there's a time limit. So that's maybe not as big an issue as a real full-time job where, nobody likes to end that kind of relationship. So you're always, from the hiring side, you're always careful starting it.
Definitely. I mean, great point. Maybe we can move over to John Paul's questions. And John Paul, if you don't mind asking your question to Mary first.
Sure. Hi, Marie. So my question is basically based off the fact that you've been in the energy sector for 20 plus years and you've clearly moved around a lot and seen different sides of it. And I just wanted to know how you think the skills required to work in the energy sector have changed over the last 20 plus years, like more economics versus computer science or anything like that.
That's a good question. So I think some things that haven't changed is economics and engineering are both extremely useful. And some of the best teams that I've worked on and companies I've worked with have a mix. Engineers see the world in a completely different way than economists do. And in the energy sector, that's actually really, really helpful for research and thinking about things that might unfold in the future. And a lot of what economists do is talk about things that might unfold in the future. So those two skills are really helpful. I know there's a lot more use of big data in certain organizations and certain research organizations, probably more on the financial side. So that could be a useful skill. But I think there's some basics that haven't changed. A lot of people are great at quants. But believe it or not, it's harder to find people who can write. So some of the jobs that I've hired for in the especially at IHS in the past, we look for a good writing sample, someone who can collect their thoughts, support research. It's very important. So, and usually in an organization, junior people come in and do a lot of the data work and number crunching and modeling, and folks coming in at that level usually have much better skills with the technology than people at my level who, you know, my spreadsheet skills are probably 15, 20 years out of date. So I'd say that's table stakes, right? That's where the bar is. Almost everyone has it. But I think being able to take it to the next level, client-ready deliverables in the consulting business have to be clear. They have to have a message. You don't just like pile data in front of clients and say, go figure it out. So there needs to be sort of a level of like integrating thought, understanding what it means, and presenting written materials. And that definitely hasn't changed in the many decades. One thing that has changed though is the quality of slides and visuals and presentation decks has gotten really slick and really gorgeous now. So that's a nice skill that I think a lot of the junior folks coming in have, and people like me are, I'll do work and I'll hand it to somebody else saying, could you just make this look nice? Because I think the level of just visual appeal, I know it sounds trivial, but that's really changed over the decades.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Thank you, Marie. John Paul, would you mind go ahead and ask Sayad your question, and then we have a few questions from the audience in the last few minutes until we wrap up.
Sure. It's just a quick question. You kind of touched over it in your 10 minutes that you had, but I just wanted to know during your career, whether at London Economics or before that, how much of your skills have you learned from your degrees versus how much of it have you just picked up on the job?
Yeah, this is a great question, John. You know, I would say 90% of everything that you learn is really on the job. It's really hands-on. So that's why, if you remember earlier what I said, especially for research associate, which is the entry-level position, really the prerequisite for that position is a genuine interest, right, in the field, in the industry, right? Because once you have it, you will be able to, I mean, that's basically everything that you need to carry you through that steep learning curve, right? So I would say that, yeah, I would say 90% of what you learn is on the job. Things that you've learned at school come in handy, that's for sure. But it depends on the type of project that you work on. I was hired at LEI, my background is in finance. I was hired at LEI because of that background, because they were trying to fill a specific need that they had at that time, which was, sort of having someone with a little bit of corporate finance background to add to the team, right? So, and this was helpful. And in some cases, some of the projects that you work on with developers, investment bank, you have to review, analyze, or sometimes build financial model, which is not something that you typically do in economics. But when I'm staff on those projects, obviously, I definitely use a lot of my skill set everything that I have learned in school. But um, but again, that will be just more of a starting package, right? It's really just to get you started, because again, this is a niche industry, and everything that you will have to do for a client, you will have to learn it basically on the job and use your core skill set, technical skill set in economics or finance to just to do the just to do the delivery of of the project. But policy design, regulatory economics, discussion about sustainability, out of that, there is no even the modeling of the wholesale market that we do. The best way to learn those things will be on the job. There is no other way to learn it.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you both. Let's see, there are a couple of questions from the audience, and I know we're approaching 2 p.m., so I want to give want to ask a couple of questions on behalf of students who are online. Emmanuel asks, this is for both of you, both Sayad and Marie. What mistakes did you make early on in your career that you would caution younger professional not to make? Which is a great question, I think.
I've made so many mistakes. I'm not sure where to start.
Right.
You don't think that everything's about you all the time. Like your boss could be yelling, things could be going wrong. It's not, there's a million things that go on in an organization. Everybody has goals. Everybody's trying to drive their train down the tracks. And sometimes just sort of taking a step back, it can be stressful, right? You want to do a good job. It has to do with your own pride of, putting the good work together, not to mention earning a living. But sometimes there's just insane things that go on in any organization, and they really don't have anything to do with you. Sometimes it's just good to like step back, take a breath, So I think that would be something. I don't know that I would have done anything all that different, but it would have just been a lot less stressful when I was younger to take that perspective, I think.
Yeah. No, I think you said it, Maria. One of the things maybe to be able to stay out of trouble, I would say always try to never take a shortcut. Always try to do the best that you can, because you're gonna run a situation where, because this is a business where you'll be working on one project today, and you're not gonna hear from the client until 3 years later. And you have to be able to stand by the work that you've done, today, and being able to defend that work. And if you take shortcuts, in some cases, you can come back and bite you, because you never really know who you will be coming across to, because again, it's a small world, it's a small industry, small world. So always treat people fairly. Be nice with people. Do your job the right way. Don't take shortcuts, because you really don't know who you can come across in the short term or the midterm. It's really crazy how I run into people that I've worked with years ago, and because I was nice with those guys, it works well when you see them. So, and one thing that I'd like to stress is also the networking, and this is something that I miss a lot, because this was basically part of my routine, is having networking just as my daily job. And it's the best way to further your professional career. You basically don't have the choice. You have to network, because that's the way for you to get your foot out the door in a situation where sometimes you're not supposed to be there, or you can easily be overlooked. If you connect with people, you nurture those connections, great things will happen.
And so maybe building on this last point, which I think is a great point, and something that a lot of students are also interested in asking about. I was wondering if you could give your perspectives about, I mean, how do you network in these like very different days, like over the past few months? Like what kind of, I was asking Mary about conferences like about half an hour ago, but in general, like what strategies has each one of you used in these past months that maybe you can share with us and students can think about as well?
Mary, I don't know if you want to go
Oh,
first.
I'll go. So I've been involved in this organization, the U.S. Association for Energy Economics. And in fact, I thought back on this. In 1989, I submitted a paper and I won the best student paper competition. I think there still is a student paper competition in USAEE. So that's nice because, some local area chapters, and I think in Pennsylvania, in the Three Rivers area, there's a really good local chapter, but it's also a US-wide and it's got an international, the IAEE. So it's more important now, I think, to be able to stay connected through virtual pieces of organizations where you'd normally be able to see people face to face, like going to conferences. I mean, it's great to work for a company that will pay to send you to a conference. And I've noticed that when a lot of younger folks go to conferences, they're very focused on the content, which is great. But after a while, you realize that that's not the reason for the conference. The reason for the conference is people get together and talk and say hello, either formally or informally. You don't always have to be pitching your company or pitching any work. You just meet people. And the content, the material at the conference could be interesting, leads to a conversation or exchange of materials or something like that. So I think leveraging the virtual components of organizations, I mean, if you're interested in energy economics, USAEE is great because everybody in this organization has this insatiable curiosity about energy, and that's why it's fun. I'm a non-attorney member of the Energy Bar Association. They have great events. Now we're doing virtual events, the Boston Economic Club, things like that. And then as you build a career and you've worked for one company or another organization and the one after that, it's like stay in touch with people you liked, like call them on the phone. Hello, how's it going? I've reached out and called folks that have been my clients in the past or that I've been colleagues with in the past during the pandemic and just said, how's it going? Like, how's your life? How's everything going? Just to stay in touch. It's just, it makes your career more interesting and fun. And then after a few years of that, you've really built a network. And I guess now it's harder. You can't see people face to face live, but this is a whole lot better than nothing,
That's absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, would you?
And it's good to have a core network. To me, I define a network. It's basically a group of individuals who know each other. So basically, you can have on LinkedIn, I don't know, hundreds of connections, but if you reach out to one of your connections and that person doesn't know who you are, that's mean that is not a genuine connection. So it's very important to spend that time connecting with people, reaching out to those people and having meaningful conversation. And this is how you can really preserve your network, make it strong and grow. Mary, looks like you've been busier than me during the confinement and stuff. I've been really, I haven't done much extra networking, but what I've done is to reach out to people in my network and just to, just to say hi, and just, understanding their situation and see where everyone is and just getting an update on people and see how they do. I think it's well, it is important to me because I actually do care about those people and the people I connect with. So that's what I've been doing, and I wish I could do more, but I really can't wait for us to go out again and being able to. I used to be a member of the Young Professional in Energy, which is a nonprofit organization. Also, what we used to do is organizing networking events for young professionals in energy, including students. And I've done that for, I guess, what, 5 to 7 years. And I was on the board until 2 years ago. And that was a great way to put myself out there and meeting very interesting people, people doing very interesting things on hydrogen, on clean tech. So, yes, can't wait for this situation to be over. So.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your insights on that. So I know that we're now a little bit over time. It's 2:05, and there are a couple of other questions from students. So I was wondering if the two of you might be open to follow up with these students, if there are any follow-up questions separately. And maybe what I can do is I can share your emails if you're open to that for, again, follow-up questions. I think if there are no, let's see, other questions from John Paul or Chetan, I would personally like to thank both of you, Sayad and Marie, for joining us today. You gave us a lot of food for thought and a lot of interesting perspectives and insights. And I do appreciate your taking your time today to network with us and tell us a little bit more about where you are in your energy career.
Happy to do it.
Thank you. Thank you for doing it. So I'll hand things over to Dave. And yeah, that's it. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Kiera, and thank you to our distinguished panelists, really, for an outstanding discussion. I've learned both a lot about you over the last hour listening in, so fascinating history. You know, it's interesting how we all evolve in our careers, and, you know, being nimble and flexible and willing to learn is going to get you far, without a doubt. This is an ongoing series on recruiting and career advice. This is the second of 5 that are in our pipeline. We're very grateful to Kiera Loprete for her spearheading this effort. Please be aware that this has been recorded on our Rewind series. It will be available on our website. So for students that are listening, be aware that you can refer your friends and colleagues to listen to this free of charge on the association's website. If you're not a member of USAE, we certainly welcome you to join. Visit us at www.usae.org. Wherever this does find you, I wish you a good rest of your day, and I officially close this webinar.